Somewhere in the outer rings of the Cassian galaxy, there is a name that makes entire fleets stop moving. It is not the name of a general. It is not the name of a king. It is not the name of a god. It is the name of a woman. A woman who, not so long ago, could not even lift a standard-issue combat blade. A woman who was handed over to a human stranger, like she was worth nothing. A woman every warrior in the known universe laughed at. They called her weak. They called her broken. They called her a mistake. But here is what nobody tells you about the ones the universe throws away. Sometimes, they come back. And when they do, nothing is ever the same again. Tonight, on HFI Sci-Fi, we are telling you the full story. The story of Lyra, the frail alien girl nobody wanted. The bride traded away in silence. The warrior who rose so fast and so terrifyingly that even the ancient war records had to be rewritten just to include her name. 3 things in this story are going to shock you. First, the moment she was sold, the people who sold her thought they were getting rid of a problem. They had no idea they were releasing the most dangerous being alive. Second, the human man who married her, he did not make her strong. She was already strong. He just gave her a reason to stop hiding it. Third, the final battle at the edge of the universe. Every commander who faced her that day, they never fought again. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The planet Velhara was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. It was cold in the way that places become cold when they have forgotten how to hope. The sky there was always a dull shade of silver. The wind was always low and thin. The buildings were tall but empty-looking, like they had been built for a larger population that had long since left. The Velhari people were ancient. They had been alive as a civilization long before humans had even figured out how fire worked. Their history stretched back millions of years. Their art, their science, their medicine, all of it was older than most star systems in the known map. But something had gone wrong with them. Slowly, over thousands of years, the Velhari bloodline had weakened. Their bodies had become smaller, thinner, more fragile. They were thinkers, scholars, philosophers, but not fighters. Not anymore. And in a universe that respected power above almost everything else, a people who could not fight were a people who could not survive. So they made deals. The Velhari elders had learned to trade. Not goods, not technology, people. Specifically their young women. They would offer their daughters in arranged marriages to powerful species, warriors, commanders, soldiers, in exchange for protection, territory, and political favor. It was not love. It was survival. And they had been doing it for so long that most of the Velhari people had stopped questioning it. Lyra was 17 years old when the elders chose her name. She was sitting in the lower library when they came for her. She had a book open in her lap, a thick old text about the star maps of the Seventh Rim, and she was so deep in reading that she did not hear the footsteps until the door was already open. 3 elders stood in the doorway. Their robes were gray. Their faces were calm. That calm was the most terrifying thing about them. They were not sorry. They were not uncomfortable. They had done this many times before. Lyra, the tallest one, said, "You have been selected." She looked up at them. She knew what those words meant. Every girl on Velhara knew what those words meant. "Who?" she asked. "A human," the elder said. "A soldier. His name is Marcus Cole. He is decorated, well-regarded, and his government has offered substantial territorial protection in exchange for this union. You will be transferred within the next 3 cycles." Lyra closed her book slowly. She did not cry. She did not argue. She had learned early in life that neither of those things worked on the elders. She just nodded and looked back down at the cover of the book in her hands. The elders left, and in the silence of the empty library, Lyra sat very still. She was small, even by Velhari standards. Her frame was thin, her hands almost childlike. Her eyes were a pale silver blue, large and wide set, the way Velhari eyes always were. She had a quiet kind of face, the kind of face that people looked past at parties. the kind of face nobody remembered. But her mind. Her mind was something else entirely. Since she was a small child, Lyra had been different in ways she could not fully explain. She read everything. She remembered everything. She understood patterns in data, in movement, in energy, in behavior, things that other Velhari her age simply did not see. Her teachers had praised her and feared her in equal measure. Praised her because she was brilliant. Feared her because brilliance in a girl with no combat worth was, in their world, ultimately useless. There was something else too. Something she had never told anyone. When she was very still, very, very still, she could feel things. Not emotions, not impressions. Something older than that. Something deep in the bones. A vibration in the air around living things. A pressure. A weight. She had read about it once in a restricted text she was not supposed to have found. The Velhari called it Velcara. Ancient fire. The old record said some Velhari, long before the bloodline weakened, had been born with it. Warriors, priests, seers, people who could channel the energy of their own cells into physical force. The records also said that lineage had died out. Apparently, nobody had told Lyra's body that. She had never let it out. She had always pressed it down, kept it locked away, kept it quiet. She had watched what happened to Velhari who stood out, who challenged the elders, who refused what the world decided for them. She was not stupid. She understood the rules. But sitting in that cold library with those 3 words still hanging in the air, "You have been selected," she felt the Velcara move inside her like a sleeping animal that had just heard something dangerous outside. She pressed it back down. Not yet, she thought. Not yet. 3 cycles later, she was on a transport ship. She had 1 bag. It contained 2 changes of clothing, her star map book, a small recording device her mother had given her, and nothing else. She sat in the rear passenger compartment alone. The transport crew, 3 Cassian traders, barely looked at her. She was cargo to them. A quiet, forgettable, too small alien woman going to meet a man she had never spoken to. The human world she was heading to was called Garrison Station 7. It was a military installation at the edge of the outer reach, a massive floating fortress that served as a forward base for the United Human Frontier Command. Thousands of soldiers lived there. Thousands of the toughest, most battle-hardened humans in the galaxy. They were big. They were loud. They were built for war, in a way that Velhari were not. Lyra had read everything she could find about humans in the 3 cycles since the elders had told her. She had studied their history, their military structure, their biology, their psychology. She had read about their wars, and there had been many. She had read about their culture, complex and loud and full of emotion. She had read about their food, strange and overwhelming. She had read about their capacity for violence, extraordinary. And she had read about Marcus Cole, decorated combat veteran, 31 years old, former Special Operations soldier, currently stationed at Garrison 7 as a senior tactical advisor, multiple commendations, known in military records as calm, precise, and methodical. No family, no close social ties, 1 note in a psychological evaluation that had made her pause. Tends to see potential where others do not. She had read that line 3 times. She did not know why. But something about it had stayed with her. The transport docked at Garrison Station 7 on a gray morning. Lyra picked up her bag, walked down the ramp, and stepped into a world that smelled like metal and engine fuel and hundreds of human bodies all living close together. And at the bottom of the ramp, a tall man was waiting. He was human, dark-haired, broad-shouldered, with the kind of steady eyes that soldiers get after years of learning to read a room before walking into it. He was not smiling. He was not frowning. He was just watching her come down the ramp with the same focused, patient expression she had read about in his file. He looked at her the way very few people had ever looked at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. "Lyra Vel," he said. His voice was low and even. "Marcus Cole," she said. A pause. You're smaller than I expected, he said. You're louder than I expected, she said. He blinked. Then, something she had not prepared for, he laughed. A short, surprised, genuine laugh, like she had caught him off guard in a way people rarely did. Fair enough, he said. Welcome to Garrison 7. She looked at him for a long moment, and somewhere deep in her chest, the Velcara moved again. She pressed it back down. But this time, it was harder. Nobody at Garrison Station 7 was cruel to Lyra on purpose. That was almost worse. Cruelty with purpose she could have fought. Cruelty with purpose has edges. You can grab it. You can push back against it. But what she found at Garrison 7 was something quieter and in some ways far more suffocating. It was indifference dressed up as politeness. It was the kind of treatment that said, without ever using actual words, you do not belong here. And everyone already knows it, and there is nothing you can do about that. The soldiers were not mean to her. They just did not see her. She would walk into the common mess hall and conversations would continue as if she had not arrived. She would sit at a table and people would shift just slightly, not enough to be rude, just enough to create distance. She would try to speak and responses would come back short and distracted, the way you answer someone you are waiting to stop talking. Even the other non-human residents of Garrison 7, and there were several, various alien contractors and diplomatic liaisons, kept a careful, polite distance. The Velhari were known, apparently, as a dying people, as a civilization in decline, as a people who had traded away their dignity so many times that the word Velhari had quietly, cruelly, become slang in several galactic languages for someone with no fight left. Lyra knew this. She had read it. But reading about humiliation and living inside it were two very different things. The only space that was truly hers was the small quarters she and Marcus shared. They were formal with each other, careful and measured, like two people trying to avoid bumping into furniture in a dark room. Marcus did not treat her poorly. He was not the kind of man who had it in him to be deliberately unkind. He brought her access to the station's library systems without her asking. He made sure her diet needs were met. He explained the station's layout and schedule so she would not get lost. But he did not talk to her. Not really. Not deeply. They were strangers who happened to share a room, and the arrangement was so strange and so forced that neither of them quite knew how to cross the distance without it feeling like an intrusion. She spent her first weeks in the library. The Garrison 7 database was the most comprehensive she had ever accessed. Military records, scientific research, tactical analysis, xenobiological data, thousands of years of accumulated human knowledge laid out in organized systems, fully searchable, fully accessible to her clearance level. She ate it. She breathed it. She pulled files and cross-referenced them, and built mental maps of things she had always been curious about. And she started to find something. The Velcara was not what the old Velhari text said it was. She had always assumed it was a biological accident, a quirk of her particular genetics, something that had surfaced randomly in her bloodline. But as she dug deeper into xenobiological literature, into human research on non-human energy systems, into classified Frontier Command reports about anomalous readings near Velhari populations, she began to see a pattern. The Velcara was not random. It was recessive. It had been engineered out of the Velhari bloodline deliberately, thousands of years ago, by the same elder caste that now traded daughters for political protection. They had identified the Velcara as a threat to their own power, because a Velhari who carried it was, according to pre-suppression records, effectively unstoppable in combat. The energy they could channel was so far beyond anything that could be explained by conventional biology that every encounter record involving a pre-suppression Velcara carrier ended the same way. Victory. Every single time. The elders had removed it from the bloodline because they did not want warriors. They wanted leverage. They wanted daughters they could trade. A people of warriors could not be controlled. A people of scholars who needed protection? That was a people the elders could manage. And somehow, after thousands of years of careful, deliberate genetic pruning, a ghost of the old bloodline had survived. In her. Lyra sat in the library for a long time after she understood this. She thought about the elders standing in the doorway with their gray robes and their calm faces. She thought about the transport ship. She thought about the word Velhara being used as a synonym for helpless. And for the first time in her life, the thing she felt about all of this was not sadness. It was something else. It was very quiet, very cold, very clear. She closed the file. She walked back to her quarters. Marcus was there, reviewing tactical maps on a display screen. He glanced up at her and noticed immediately, she saw it in the way his eyes tightened slightly, that something had changed on her face. "You okay?" he asked. "I need to train," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Train," he repeated. "Yes," she said. "I need access to a combat training facility. The full facility. Not a modified one. Not a beginner circuit. The real one." He was quiet for a moment. "Lyra," he said carefully, "the full training facility is designed for frontier combat class soldiers. The baseline physical requirements alone would." "I know what the requirements are," she said. "I memorized them 3 days ago. I am not asking for your assessment of my capability. I am asking for access." A pause. That same expression crossed his face again, the one from the day she arrived. Like something had caught him off guard in a way he had not expected. He looked at her for a long, careful moment. Then he nodded. "I'll set it up for tomorrow morning," he said. She nodded back. She went to the small window in their quarters and looked out at the stars. Garrison 7 hung in the middle of nothing, surrounded by the deep black of the outer reach. The stars out here were different from the ones over Velhara. Brighter. More scattered. Less organized. She felt the Velcara. She did not press it back down this time. She just let it sit there, warm and quiet, and patient, like a fire that had been waiting a very long time for someone to finally open the door. "Tomorrow," she said, to no one in particular, but she was already counting down the hours. The full training facility at Garrison Station 7 was terrifying. Not because of the equipment, not because of the technology. It was terrifying because of the people already inside it when Lyra walked through the door at 0600 the next morning. There were 22 soldiers in the facility. All human, all massive by any biological standard. They were running drills, lifting combat loads, sparring in the pressure-resistant simulation ring, and when Lyra walked in, every single one of them stopped. The silence was loud. Not the polite silence of the mess hall. Not the quiet indifference of the corridors. This was genuine, stunned, wide-eyed silence. The kind of silence that happens when something appears that makes no sense in its context. A Velhara woman, in a combat facility, in full workout gear that, on her small frame, looked like it had been designed for a completely different species, because it had been. Sergeant Dara Holt was the one who spoke first. She was the facility's combat training coordinator, a full head taller than Lyra, and built like she had been assembled out of solid architecture. "Can I help you?" she said. The words were polite. The tone was not. "I am here to train," Lyra said. "This facility operates at advanced combat standard," Holt said. "I know," Lyra said. "Standard physical entry assessment applies to all first-time users," Holt said. "It is not modified for non-human participants." "I know," Lyra said again. Holt looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked at the clearance code on Lyra's wristpad. Marcus had set it up exactly as promised, and then she looked back at Lyra's face. Whatever she saw there made her decide to stop arguing. "Entry assessment is 3 components," Holt said, turning toward the assessment floor. "Strength load, endurance circuit, and combat simulation. Pass all 3 and you get full facility access. Fail any one and you're out. No appeals." "Understood," Lyra said. She followed Holt to the assessment station. The soldiers had not gone back to their drills. They were watching. Openly, shamelessly watching. A few of them had small smiles. Not cruel smiles. They were not bad people. But the kind of smile that appears when you are absolutely certain you know exactly what is about to happen. They were certain this was going to be funny. They were wrong. The strength load component required lifting a series of combat-grade supply containers to a marked height within a set time. The containers were calibrated for standard human musculature. Most new recruits struggled with the fourth one. Lyra looked at the containers for about 3 seconds, then lifted the first one cleanly and precisely, like she had studied the geometry of it beforehand, which, in her mind, she had. She moved through all 6 containers in sequence, 2 seconds under the time limit. The smiles in the room faded a little. The endurance circuit was a 3.2-kilometer run through a variable gravity corridor, a track that shifted its gravitational pull between 0.8 and 1.4 standard G at random intervals. The design was meant to simulate combat terrain unpredictability. Most soldiers hit the wall around the 2-kilometer mark. Lyra ran the whole thing. Not fast. She was not fast. Not yet. But perfectly even. Like a machine that had calculated the optimal pace and was simply executing it. By the end of the endurance circuit, nobody was smiling at all. The combat simulation was the last component. It was a standard 12-minute session against a Tier 2 combat AI in the simulation ring, the kind of session that was supposed to assess basic fighting instinct and physical response timing. It was not meant to be passed by a first-timer. It was meant to be assessed. Not won. Lyra stepped into the simulation ring. The combat AI was a physical exoskeleton, 7 feet tall, designed to mirror real combat opponent behavior, with speed and power calibrated to Tier 2 specification. It was not gentle. 3 recruits in the last month had left this ring with minor injuries. The AI activated. And for the first 3 minutes, it was bad. The AI was faster than anything Lyra had trained against, which was nothing technically because she had never trained against anything. It hit her twice. Once in the ribs, once in the upper shoulder. She stumbled. She recovered. She moved wrong twice, crossed her feet once, nearly went down. In the stands, the soldiers leaned forward slightly. But here is what none of them could see. She was learning, not slowly, not gradually, with terrifying speed. Every movement the AI made, she filed. Every pattern, every weight shift, every angle of attack, she was reading it in real time, building a model of it in her mind faster than the AI was updating its behavior. She was behind the curve for 3 minutes. Then, she was on the curve. Then, she was ahead of it. At minute 4, she landed her first clean counterattack. At minute 7, she had identified all primary attack patterns of the Tier 2 AI. At minute 9, she was running them in reverse. At minute 11, she had the AI on the defensive. At minute 12, the timer ended. Holt stopped the session and looked at her board. Then she looked at Lyra. Then she looked at her board again. "You've never trained before," she said. It was not really a question. "No," Lyra said. "You just ran a cold entry against a Tier 2 simulation," Holt said. "And you were controlling it by the end." "I learned quickly," Lyra said. The facility was completely silent. 22 soldiers, none of whom were smiling now, looking at a small, thin Velhari woman standing in the middle of the simulation ring, breathing calmly, holding herself like someone who had just confirmed something they had long suspected about themselves. But that was not even the real thing. The real thing happened on the walk back to her quarters. She was alone in a corridor on the lower level, a long, dim passage between the facility and the residential block, and she stopped. Because she felt something she had never felt before. The Velcara was not sitting quietly anymore. It was awake. Fully, completely, undeniably awake, humming through her from her feet to the tips of her fingers, warm and enormous and precise, like every cell in her body had just simultaneously remembered something ancient. She held her hand up in the empty corridor, and the air around her fingers shimmered. Not a trick of the light, not her imagination. The air itself bent slightly, pressed by something that was coming out of her that had no name in current science. She stood there for a long time. Then she lowered her hand, and she walked back to her quarters with the quiet, focused calm of someone who now understood, completely and without any remaining doubt, exactly what she was. Marcus noticed. Of course he noticed. He was a tactical advisor with 20 years of experience reading people, Reading rooms, reading threats, reading the tiny shifts in behavior that most people missed entirely. He had built his entire career on noticing things. He noticed that Lyra came back from the facility different. Not louder. Not more aggressive. Actually quieter, if anything. But quiet in a different way. Before, her quiet had been the quiet of someone trying not to take up space. Now it was the quiet of someone who had stopped worrying about how much space they took. He pulled Holt's assessment report that evening. He read it 3 times. Then he went and found Lyra in the library, which is always where she was, and he sat down across from her without preamble. "Tell me what you are," he said. She looked up at him over her book. "What do you mean?" "I mean what I said," he said. "Tell me what you actually are. Not what the Velhara elders told the transfer documentation. Not what the official xenobiological classification says. What you actually are." A long pause. She studied him. His face. His eyes. That same focused steadiness she had seen the day she arrived. "Why do you ask?" she said. "Because Dara Holt has been doing combat assessments for 11 years, he said. And she filed a report this afternoon that uses the word unprecedented 4 times. I have never seen her use that word once. And because whatever you did in that simulation ring today was not something that should be physically possible for a first-timer, human or otherwise." Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she told him. She told him about the Velcara, about the ancient Velhari warriors, about the elder decision to remove it from the bloodline, about the classified files, the cross-referenced data, the pattern she had reconstructed from fragments across 17 different academic databases. She told him all of it, clearly and precisely the way she always communicated, without performance, without softening, just the straight line from point to point. When she finished, Marcus was quiet for a long time. "They bred it out intentionally," he said. "Yes," she said, "because they wanted people they could control," he said. "Yes," she said, "but it came back in you." "Yes," she said. He leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then he looked back at her. "How strong is it?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said. "I have never let it fully out. The old records are incomplete. Most of the combat data from before the suppression was destroyed." "But your instinct," he said. "What does your instinct say?" She met his eyes. "That it is very, very strong," she said quietly. He nodded slowly. "Then we need to train it," he said. She blinked. "You believe me. You just passed a cold Tier 2 assessment on your first day in the facility," he said flatly. "Yes. I believe you." A pause. "I also believe the elders knew exactly what they were giving away when they sent you here. And I do not think they gave you away. I think they got rid of you. Something about that landed hard, not painfully. It landed like a key in a lock." "Yes," she said. "I think so too." He stood up. "Training starts tomorrow. Real training. Not the assessment circuit. Actual combat methodology. I will supervise it myself." He paused. "Lyra. One thing." She looked at him. "What you carry, do not let anyone else know what it is. Not yet. Not until we understand its full range. The last thing you need right now is the Frontier Command deciding it wants to own what you are before you understand it yourself." She looked at him for a moment. "You are protecting me," she said. Not accusing, just noting it, like something unexpected appearing in data. "I am protecting both of us," he said. "This is my facility and my clearance that got you in there. Whatever you are, we figure it out together." She was quiet for a moment. "Why?" she said. "Why does it matter to you?" He looked at her steadily. "Because people write people off too fast," he said. "I have seen it my entire career. The ones everyone overlooks, they are always the most dangerous. Not because they are trying to prove something, but because they have had to figure everything out on their own, and that makes them sharper than anything the system produces." He left the library. Lyra sat with her book closed in her lap. She felt the Velcara hum quietly. This time she did not press it down. She let it settle, warm, and present, like it belonged there. Because it did. The next 3 months were the most extraordinary of her life. Marcus trained her with the same systematic precision he applied to everything, but he also gave her room. He did not try to teach her a method. He watched how she moved, how she thought, how she processed information in physical space, and he built training around what she already was rather than trying to make her into something the standard system had designed. And she grew. Not gradually. Explosively. Every week she was faster. Every week her reaction timing dropped. Every week her combat simulation results climbed tier levels that normally took soldiers years to advance through. She moved through Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4 in 8 weeks. By week 10 she was in the Tier 5 simulation, a level that only 12 soldiers at Garrison 7 were cleared for, and she was not just passing it, she was dismantling it. And the Velcara, once she understood how to use it, once she stopped fighting its nature and started working with it the way Marcus had taught her to work with everything, became something that had no tier classification, because nothing in the system's design had anticipated it. It was not strength exactly. It was not speed exactly. It was something that sat between the two and around both of them, an awareness of energy in the space around her that let her feel an attack before it was launched, respond to a movement before it completed, read the physical intention of a living opponent through something that was half instinct and half something older and stranger than instinct. She began to understand what the old records had meant. A pre-suppression Velcara carrier in full expression was not simply a good fighter. They were something the universe had no good word for. Marcus watched her in the simulation ring one morning in the 3rd month, and when she stepped out after a clean, total domination of the highest available AI simulation, he looked at her with an expression she had not seen on his face before. It was not pride exactly. It was something closer to awe. "Lyra," he said quietly. "Yes?" She said. "They have no idea," he said. "The elders, the Frontier Command, everyone who looked at you and saw nothing. They have absolutely no idea what they missed." She looked at him for a moment. "They will," she said. And she was right. The war started on a Tuesday. Not a metaphorical war. An actual, full-scale, galactic military conflict. The kind that redraws territorial maps and fills civilian evacuation records with millions of names. The Kreth Dominion, an empire that had been expanding its borders by force for 3 generations, made a move that the Frontier Command had been watching for 2 years. A simultaneous assault on 7 outer reach installations, including 2 civilian deep space habitats and 1 medical research station with no military capability at all. Garrison Station 7 received the emergency transmission at 0347 hours. Marcus was already awake, he rarely slept deeply, when the alarm activated. He was at his command station within 90 seconds, pulling tactical data, assessing the situation with the same precise, unhurried focus that had made him one of the most effective operational minds in the command. Lyra was beside him before he had finished reading the first report. She had read faster. "The 7 Spire installations are the priority targets," she said, pointing at the map display. "Not because of military value, because of position. If the Kreth hold all 7 simultaneously, they create a containment corridor through the outer reach that cuts the Frontier Command's rapid response route by 60%. He looked at her. "That is not in the report," he said. "It is in the positional data," she said. "The report has not been analyzed yet. The data has been transmitted. I read the raw coordinates." He looked at the map, then back at her. "You're right," he said. "The 3rd installation, Spire 3, is the keystone," she said. "If Command deploys to defend all 7 equally, they will be spread too thin and lose all 7. If they sacrifice 6 and concentrate everything at Spire 3, they hold the corridor." He was on the command frequency within 2 minutes. The recommendation he transmitted to Central Command was taken seriously. Marcus had the kind of record that made people listen, and when the tactical review team ran their own analysis 2 hours later, they confirmed every element of Lyra's assessment. That was the first time Central Command heard her name. It would not be the last. In the 72 hours that followed the initial Kreth assault, Garrison 7 became a staging point for counter-response operations. Ships arrived. Soldiers arrived. Commanders arrived. The station transformed from a routine forward base into a genuine war coordination hub, loud and crowded and full of urgency. In the chaos of it, Lyra was everywhere. She analyzed. She assessed. She identified patterns in Kreth tactical behavior that took the command's own intelligence team an additional 6 hours to find. She mapped supply line vulnerabilities, predicted secondary assault timing, flagged 3 intelligence reports as fabrications, correctly, as it turned out, before the verification team had completed their review. People noticed. The soldiers who had watched her in the training facility months ago, the ones who had smiled when she walked in on her first day, they were the first to notice. And then officers. And then the visiting commanders. But the moment that changed everything happened on the 4th day. A Kreth assault squad breached Garrison 7. Nobody expected it. The station's external defense held, or should have held, but a Kreth rapid insertion team had used a technique that Frontier Command had not yet catalogued. They had used the station's own waste heat exhaust vents to mask their approach signature, and inserted 12 elite Kreth soldiers directly into the station's mid-level tactical floor. The alarm came late. By the time it activated, the Kreth squad was already inside. By the time the station's rapid response team deployed, the Kreth had reached the command corridor, the corridor where the central tactical operations room was located, where Marcus and 4 senior officers were working. Lyra was in that corridor. She heard the door at the far end open. She felt the Velcara detonate. That is the only word for what happened. It did not activate or switch on. It detonated, out from the center of her body in every direction, filling the corridor with a pressure that nobody around her could see but everyone in that hallway immediately, instinctively, physically felt. Several of the officers behind her took an involuntary step back. The air in the corridor changed. Temperature. Pressure. Something that had no instrument to measure it. The 12 Kreth soldiers stopped moving. They were elite. They were experienced. They were not the kind of soldiers who stopped for anything. But they stopped. Because what was standing in front of them, this small, thin, silver-eyed alien woman, suddenly did not look small at all. The Velcara was visible now, barely, in the way that extreme heat is visible. Not as light exactly, but as a distortion of the air around her, a shimmer that had no physical source. It lasted approximately 9 seconds. 9 seconds was all it took. The lead Kreth soldier charged first, and she moved. What the corridor security footage showed, reviewed later by the station's combat analysts, then forwarded to Central Command, then classified at the highest level because nobody knew what category to put it in, was something that should not have been possible. She moved through 12 elite Kreth soldiers in 41 seconds. Without a weapon, without armor, without being touched once. When it was over, she stood at the far end of the corridor, breathing evenly, the Velcara slowly settling back into its resting state. All 12 Kreth soldiers were on the floor, alive but completely, utterly incapacitated, in a way that the medical team later described as neurological, as if every combat instinct in their nervous systems had been simply switched off. The corridor was completely silent. Marcus stood behind her. He looked at what was on the floor. He looked at her. "That is what it is," he said quietly. "Yes," she said. "The whole galaxy is about to find out," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "I know," she said. The Battle of Spire 3 happened 6 weeks later. By then, Lyra Vel was not a secret anymore. She was not officially classified. Central Command had been too busy and too confused about what exactly to do with her file, but she was known. Word had spread the way it always does in military environments. Fast and unstoppable. Passed from soldier to soldier, installation to installation, until the story had reached every corner of the frontier. The story of the Velhara woman who walked through 12 Kreth soldiers in 41 seconds. Some people exaggerated it. Some people said she had knocked them unconscious. Some said she had used a classified weapon. Some said she had moved so fast she had been invisible. Only the people who had been in that corridor knew the truth. And the truth was stranger and bigger than any of the exaggerations. When Marcus was assigned to the Spire 3 operation, the most critical engagement of the war, The battle that would either hold the corridor or lose the outer reach. He submitted one personnel request alongside the standard tactical team, one name, Lyra Vel. Central Command approved it in 12 minutes. Spire 3 was a massive ancient installation at the absolute edge of explored space, a towering, multi-level structure that had been built so long ago that nobody fully remembered who had originally constructed it. It sat at the convergence of 3 hyperspace lanes and had never, in recorded history, fallen to an enemy force. The Kreth Dominion sent its best. 300 elite Kreth soldiers. A command ship. A tactical AI that the intelligence reports described as the most sophisticated military planning system the Dominion had ever deployed. Against them, the Frontier Command had 62 soldiers, a damaged defensive installation, and one Velhara woman that most of the 62 soldiers had never met before. The numbers were wrong. Everyone in the command knew the numbers were wrong. Marcus did not look at the numbers. He looked at Lyra. And Lyra looked at Spire 3. The battle began at 0200 hours on a Friday. The Kreth came in 3 coordinated waves, exactly as Lyra had predicted they would, exactly as she had mapped in the tactical briefing 48 hours earlier. The first wave hit the outer defense layer hard and fast, designed to drain the defenders' ammunition and attention. The second wave pushed through the breach points she had identified in advance. The third wave, the elite unit, the soldiers the Dominion had been saving for the final push, came directly at the core. But they found that she had already been there. She had mapped every entry point, every structural weakness, every predictable tactical angle in the installation. She had walked through the entire structure twice, and remembered all of it. She had repositioned the defense team in ways that looked wrong on paper, but were precisely right in execution. Because she saw the battlefield not as a static map, but as a living system of movement and energy and probability. The Frontier Command team held the first 2 waves. Not easily. Not without cost. 3 soldiers were wounded in the second wave engagement. But they held. And then the third wave came. The Kreth elite, 90 soldiers, the finest the Dominion had ever trained, moved through the outer layer of the installation in perfect tactical formation. They were silent. They were fast. They were ruthless. They reached the central corridor, and Lyra stepped out to meet them. She was not in armor. She had tried armor. It slowed her in ways that were counterproductive to how the Velcara worked. She was in standard combat clothing, her silver blue eyes calm and clear and completely steady. The Kreth commander, a veteran of 40 engagements, a soldier who had stormed defended installations on 11 different worlds, looked at her. He looked behind her to confirm what his sensors had already told him. She was alone. "Move aside," he said. "No," she said. What happened next is in the record. Not all of it. Parts of the security footage remain classified, reportedly because the officers who reviewed it could not agree on what category of phenomenon they were watching. But the summary is documented. 90 Kreth elite soldiers entered that corridor. None of them came out standing. The engagement lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. At no point in those 4 minutes and 17 seconds did any weapon discharge from Lyra's position. At no point was she struck. At no point did she retreat, stumble, or slow. The Velcara, fully and completely and unreservedly released for the first time in her life, was not a weapon in any sense the Frontier Command had a classification for. It did not destroy. It overwhelmed. It pushed into the energy of living nervous systems with a precision and force that left opponents not dead, but simply unable to continue, their combat function shut down at the cellular level. Their bodies receiving a message from something older than language that said, "Stop." When it was over, Lyra stood at the far end of the corridor. 90 soldiers. 4 minutes. 0 weapons. The Kreth command ship, receiving no signal from its elite unit, reviewed the sensor data from the corridor. Then it transmitted a message to the Dominion High Command. Then it retreated. The message was intercepted by Frontier Command intelligence and translated within hours. It said, in full, "There is something in that installation that we do not have a name for. We are not proceeding. This engagement is suspended. The Battle of Spire 3 was over. The aftermath was not quiet. The Kreth Dominion did not surrender, not immediately. But the corridor held. The outer reach remained open. And the Dominion, which had been expanding for 3 consecutive generations without hesitation, stopped moving. Reportedly, they had called an internal review of their strategic assessment of the frontier. Reportedly, the name that kept appearing in that review was Lyra Vel. Back at Garrison 7, Lyra sat in the library. She had the same star map book she had carried from Velhara, the old text with the hand-worn cover. The book she had been reading when the elders had come for her. She held it in both hands and looked at the cover for a long time. Marcus sat across from her. "What are you thinking?" he said. "I am thinking about the elders," she said. "About what they decided, all those years ago, when they chose to remove the Velcara from our people." "Does it make you angry?" he said. She thought about it. "No," she said. "Not anymore. They made their choice out of fear. Fear of what we were. Fear of what we could be." She looked up at him. "But fear is a very small reason to diminish an entire people." He nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" he said. She looked at the star map on the open page of the book. "Go back to Velhara," she said. "Eventually. When this is done. The Velcara is not dead in our bloodline. If it survived in me, it survived in others. They just do not know it yet. Someone needs to tell them." She paused. "Someone needs to tell them who they used to be." He looked at her. "And in the meantime?" he said. She closed the book. "In the meantime," she said quietly, "the Kreth Dominion has not finished deciding whether to come back." She looked at the window. "At the stars, I intend to make sure the answer is no." Here is the thing nobody in this story ever expected. The elders of Velhara had believed, for thousands of years, that they were making a rational trade. Strength for safety, power for survival. Give up the warriors, keep the scholars. Give up the fire, stay warm by someone else's flame. They thought they were being smart. But what they actually did was something far more dangerous than anything a warrior could do. They made their people forget. And forgetting, truly, completely forgetting what you are, is the most dangerous thing any civilization can do. Because strength does not die when you stop practicing it. It goes underground. It waits. It passes through the blood like a secret that the body keeps even when the mind forgets. And one day, one random, unremarkable, Wednesday afternoon kind of day, it shows up in a girl in a library. A girl reading a star map book. A girl they thought they were getting rid of. Lyra Vel did not become the most feared warrior in the universe by training harder or wanting it more than anyone else. She became it because she stopped hiding what she already was. Because a human man with steady eyes looked at her and saw potential where everyone else saw liability. Because she allowed herself to be what the universe had decided she would be. A long time before she was born. In the deep molecular memory of a bloodline the elders had tried to erase. The Velhari were never a dying people. They were a hidden people. There is a difference. And that difference, that one distinction between dying and hidden, is what changed the course of a war, held an entire star corridor, and sent a Dominion fleet retreating without a single weapon being fired. They called her weak. She was never weak. She was just waiting. And the universe will spend a very long time learning the lesson she taught it on the day she stopped waiting, and simply became what she had always been. Some fires cannot be put out. They can only be delayed. If this story opened your eyes to something, if there is something in Lyra's story that you recognize, something in the idea of forgotten strength coming back, then you already understand what this story is really about. Stay with us. Because this is only the beginning. Before we close out, let us take 30 seconds with the 3 things this story leaves us with. First, the people the world discards are not always what the world says they are. Lyra was traded, dismissed, and overlooked at every single stage of this story. And at every single stage, the people doing the dismissing were wrong. Every single one. Second, strength that has been suppressed is not gone. The Velcara was buried for thousands of years. It was deliberately removed. It was systematically erased from a bloodline by people who were afraid of it. And it came back anyway. Because real power does not disappear. It waits for the right conditions. And sometimes those conditions come in the form of a human soldier who just says, I believe you. Train tomorrow. Third, the most dangerous thing the Kreth Dominion ever did was underestimate her. Not because she was waiting to be recognized, but because their certainty that she was nothing made them completely blind to everything she was. In war, in life, in everything, the enemy that beats you is never the one you were prepared for. It is always the one you did not take seriously. Now, if you are new here, welcome to H-Fi Sci-Fi. This channel is built for people who love stories about humanity, resilience, and the moments when the overlooked become unstoppable. If this story hit you the way we hoped it would, the subscribe button is right there. It costs you nothing, and it means we can keep making stories like this one for you. If you have a favorite moment from Lyra's journey, the training facility assessment, the corridor with the 12 soldiers, the final 4 minutes at Spire 3, drop it in the comments. We genuinely read every single comment, and we build our future stories based on what you tell us matters to you. Now here is our question for the community today, and we really want to hear your answers. If you were standing in that corridor at Spire 3, not as a soldier, not with any special ability, what would you have done? Would you have stepped forward? Would you have stayed back? Would you have found a third option nobody else thought of? Tell us in the comments. Because the best answers, the most interesting, the most unexpected, we are going to feature in a future video. The Phi community is full of the sharpest minds we have ever encountered, and we want to know how you think. One more thing. We are building something for the people who want to go deeper than the videos. A newsletter. A space where we share the stories behind the stories, the science, the philosophy, the actual research behind what it would mean for a human civilization to encounter something like the Velcara, what theoretical biology says about dormant evolutionary traits, what military historians think, about the real-world parallels to stories like Lyra's. If that sounds like something you want to be part of, the link is in the description. It is free, it is weekly, and it is for the people who do not just watch the story, they want to understand it. The next video is already coming. Same universe, different world, a character you will not see coming, and a story that picks up exactly where this one ends. You are going to want to be here for it. We will see you then.